My parents disinherited me after I covered their expenses for 3 years. So, I canceled every single payment and booked a trip to Thailand instead. They always called me the responsible one while I was footing their bills. Then I stumbled upon their will and discovered I was completely written out of their future. I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I grew up believing I came from a pretty tight-knit, middle-class suburban family, the whole American dream package. My parents are in their early 60s, my brother Jacob is 36, and then there's me, or not. The type of family you see in Hallmark movies, all hugs and open emotions. We're more the kind who communicate through passive-aggressive jabs about each other's life choices over a dry Thanksgiving turkey. But I always assumed that when it truly mattered, we'd have each other's backs. To give you some context, I've always been the dependable one. I got good grades, went to a state university, and landed a stable career in pharmaceutical research. It's not exactly a ticket to exclusive cocktail parties, but I pay my bills and keep my life in order. Jacob, on the other hand, was always the golden child. He went to a more prestigious university, which my parents helped finance, while I took out loans that I'll probably still be paying off when I'm in adult diapers. He earned an MBA and now works at a software startup, making a decent living. Yet he somehow always seems too busy whenever my parents need practical help. Funny how busy can make you so selective. Growing up, our roles were pretty clear. Jacob was the star, and his football games and debate tournaments were mandatory family events. Meanwhile, I once won a statewide science competition, but my parents missed it because Dad had a golf game and Mom had a hair appointment. When I got home with my trophy, Mom just said, "That's nice, honey. Did you remember to defrost the chicken for dinner?" I wasn't bitter. Okay, maybe a little bitter, like a lemon peel left out in the sun for a week. But I dealt with it. I figured that's just how families operated. Someone gets to be the star, and someone else gets to be whatever I was, the supporting role, the sidekick, or the chicken defrosting champion. I moved out at 18 for college, worked 2 jobs while taking a full course load, and graduated with honors. My graduation party was at Denny's for breakfast. My dad spent most of the time bragging about Jacob's new condo in Chicago. Jacob wasn't even there. He was networking in Cabo. Apparently, tequila shots and sunburn are key career development tools. Who knows? After college, I got a job at a pharmaceutical research company, starting at the bottom and working my way up to senior researcher. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. Good benefits, a 401k, the usual boring adult package. I bought a small condo. Adopted a cat named Professor Nibbles Don't Judge. I was high when I signed the adoption papers and settled into a quiet but fulfilling life. Jacob, meanwhile, bounced between impressive-sounding roles at companies like Blascore and Nexify, which seemed to specialize in producing branded hoodies and press releases about disrupting industries that didn't need disrupting. He lived in high-end, downtown apartments, dated Instagram models, and always seemed on the cusp of a major breakthrough. A big breakthrough, by the way. It never quite materialized, but my parents were convinced it was just around the corner. So, this is where things took a wild turn. About 3 years ago, my father had a health scare.
Oh.
It wasn't serious in the end, but it landed him in the hospital for a few days. My mom was a wreck, so I took time off work to handle everything. Hospital paperwork, insurance calls, bringing mom food that wasn't radioactive cafeteria sludge, walking their dog, you name it. Jacob sent flowers and called once, because nothing. Says I care like a $50 bouquet and a 3-minute phone call while you're probably on the toilet. During that hospital stay, I remember sitting in Dad's room while he slept. Mom had gone home to shower, so I was catching up on work emails. Dad woke up after midnight, disoriented. "Jessica," he mumbled. "Where's Jacob?" "Is in Boston, Dad." "For work? Remember, he called earlier?" Dad nodded slowly. "He's doing so well, isn't he? Such a good son." I just smiled and helped him take a sip of water. Whatever. Dad was on pain meds. I wasn't going to get into it. They started talking a lot about getting their affairs in order and making sure everything was properly set up. I didn't think much of it. It seemed sensible after a health scare. Then I started noticing little things. Dad asked me to help set up automatic payments for their bills because technology is confusing. This from a man who worked as an electrical engineer for 30 years, but suddenly forgot how buttons work. Mom called to ask if I could help with their property taxes because they were a little short that year. The requests became more and more frequent. Cable bill, water bill, new roof, plumber. Every time it was just temporary or just this once, but it eventually became my regular responsibility. I was essentially funding their lifestyle while working full-time and trying to save for my own future, you know? The future where I can retire before I'm 97 and maybe afford both rent and avocado toast in the same month. When they first asked for financial help, I was genuinely concerned. My parents had always been financially responsible. Dad's engineering career was well compensated, and Mom's part-time work as a school secretary provided a decent second income. They owned their home outright and were saving for retirement. What had changed? "We're just in a bit of a tight spot," Mom vaguely replied when I pressed her. Investments. You know, the market, I didn't push it. Maybe they'd made some questionable investment decisions. Maybe their retirement funds had taken a hit. It happens. They'd also helped me out when I needed it, like when my car broke down in college and I couldn't afford the repairs. They sent me $800, no questions asked. It felt like it was my turn to help them, except it didn't stop. The requests started small. $200 here for an unexpectedly high power bill, $350 there for car repairs. But they quickly escalated. Property taxes, insurance payments, a new water heater, new windows, and a kitchen remodel that went from, "We're just updating the countertops. We need all new appliances and custom cabinets." Meanwhile, Jacob would show up for holidays, bring in extravagant gifts, and spinning tales of his business ventures, and my parents would just eat it up. Jacob's doing so well? Jacob just got a promotion. Jacob's thinking about buying a vacation home. It's easy when you're not spending $800 every month on someone else's bills. It's amazing how much disposable income you have when you're not funneling it into your parents' bank accounts. I tried to keep track of how much I was giving them, but it just got away from me. Between the automatic payments I'd set up and the random emergency demands, I was probably handing them $1,000 to $1,500 every single month. That's not pocket change. That's a mortgage payment. It's a nice car. It's a yearly vacation to a place that requires a passport and doesn't have bed bugs. But every time I started to question it, to wonder if I should be saving that money for myself instead, the guilt would set in. They were my parents. They'd raised me, fed me, clothed me, and cared for me when I was sick. Why could I not help them when they needed it? So, I kept paying, helping, and being the responsible one. I cut back on my own spending, canceled. My gym membership switched from the expensive salon to great clips for haircuts, and started meal prepping sad little containers of rice and chicken instead of going out for lunch. I told myself it was just temporary until they got back on their feet. At first, I didn't mind helping out. They're my parents, you know. But something about the situation felt off, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It was like walking into a room and forgetting why you're there, except the room is your family dynamic, and what you forgot is your self-worth. Then, about 6 months ago, my mother texted me, inviting me to a Zoom meeting that weekend about family financial planning. I hoped they would finally acknowledge all my help and come up with a fair system. Maybe even a thank you for keeping our lights on for the past 3 years. You're the best daughter ever. A girl can dream. I logged on 5 minutes early, dressed in a nice blouse, hair combed, looking like a responsible adult who doesn't eat cereal for dinner standing over the sink. Mom and Dad joined next. Jacob came in last, looking like he'd just stepped out of a J. Crew catalog, perfectly ironed button-down. Artfully tousled hair, the kind of casual expense that costs a lot of money and time to achieve. "Hey everyone," he said, flashing that pearly white smile. Let me just share my screen." Jacob actually ran the entire presentation, sharing his screen with PowerPoint slides about estate planning and wealth management. My parents just nodded, along as he discussed their home investments and retirement funds. Jacob had apparently landed a side gig as a financial advisor infomercial host, judging by his delivery. "As you can see," Jacob explained, pointing to a pie chart that made about as much sense to me as quantum physics, "we can restructure the portfolio to maximize growth while providing necessary liquidity for current expenses. Mom and Dad were nodding like those bobblehead dogs people put in car windows. They had no idea what he was saying. I could tell because I've seen that same nodding when I try to explain my research to them. They were sporting the "we're pretending to follow," but actually thinking about what's for dinner facial expressions. The weirdest part was that my name wasn't mentioned once during the entire call. Not once. I sat there on mute, watching my own face shrink into the corner of the screen as they talked about the future as if I didn't exist. I was the digital equivalent of a houseplant during that meeting. Actually, no. Houseplants get watered and acknowledged occasionally. Slide after slide of financial jargon, projections, figures, and recommendations. Nobody said, and of course, "We need to factor in all the support Jessica has been providing." No one said, "We should probably stop relying on Jessica's income." I was invisible, a ghost, the financial equivalent of a Victorian child, expected to contribute but never speak. Until the very end, when Mom abruptly added, "Oh, and Jessica, the property tax bill is coming up again. We're counting on you. For that, sweetheart, you've always been so reliable." That was my role. The reliable one. The bill payer. The human ATM. Jessica. Making family finances happen, but without the benefit of a commercial break. I unmuted just long enough to respond, "Sure, Mom." Then I excused myself with a work call and logged off before anyone could see the tears of frustration welling up in my eyes. After that call, I felt hollow. Something wasn't adding up. Jacob had never helped them with their finances before. So why was he suddenly so involved? Why was everything being planned around him? Why did they still expect me to pay their bills? It was like they were throwing a party that I paid for but wasn't invited to attend. I started paying closer attention, watching and listening. That's when I began noticing even stranger things. Jacob was receiving mortgage-related mail at their house. Dad casually mentioned that Jacob had taken him to meet with their financial advisor. Mom asked me to help her download an app that would allow Jacob to see their bank accounts, just to keep an eye on things, because apparently having two people with access to your accounts is better than one. One Sunday, I dropped by their house unannounced with some homemade cookies, because I'm still a nice daughter. Damn it, even when I'm suspicious. They were out, but Jacob's car was in the driveway. I opened the door with my key and called out. As I entered, no response. I walked toward the kitchen and heard Jacob's voice coming from Dad's home office. He was on the phone. "Just need to finalize the transfer," he said. "Once the house is in the trust, we can." He paused when he saw me in the doorway. "Gotta go," he hastily whispered into the phone before hanging up. "Hey sis," he remarked, casually, as if I hadn't just overheard him discussing the transfer of my parents' house. "What's up?" I held up the cookie jar. "Just bringing some cookies." "What are you doing here? Just helping Dad organize some paperwork?" Vaguely at the desk, which was covered with folders and documents. Boring stuff. What kind of boring stuff? Financial stuff, estate planning, nothing interesting? I nodded slowly. "Need any help?" "I'm pretty good with organizing." He shook his head quickly, too quickly. "Nah, I got it." I have a system going. A system that apparently excluded me. Started to feel like I was in some strange, gaslighting thriller film where everyone else knows something you don't. Like The Sixth Sense, except instead of seeing dead people, I was the only one who didn't realize I was being played. Then 2 months ago, I found it. I was helping Mom look for a receipt in her home office when I noticed a folder labeled Will. Final 2023. I know I shouldn't have looked, but wouldn't you? If you're thinking no, I wouldn't. Congratulations on your moral superiority, but you're also lying. I waited until Mom went to answer the phone before pulling the folder out. My hands were shaking. I felt like a kid sneaking a peek at Christmas presents. But instead of hoping for a PlayStation, I hoped I hadn't been completely erased from my parents' lives. Inside was their amended will, completed and notarized just 3 months prior. And guess what? Everything was going to Jacob. The house, the money, Dad's vintage record collection, Mom's jewelry, all of it. Even the damn dog. There was also a letter explaining their decision. Jacob has demonstrated financial savvy and accountability. We believe he is best suited to administer our estate and legacy. Not a word about me. Not a single word. No explanation for why I received nothing. Not even a sentimental item or family photo album. I didn't even get a participation trophy for inheriting. Apparently, my 3-year financial support subscription didn't include legacy access. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The room actually spun for a second. I had to sit down. Paper crumpled in my trembling hands. This couldn't be right. There had to be a mistake. Maybe another document, another will, something that explained why I had been utterly wiped out. But there wasn't. Page after page explaining how Jacob would get everything, how he would handle the estate, and how he would carry on their legacy, while I, presumably, would receive nothing beyond the satisfaction of knowing. I had helped pay for their retirement while being written out of their existence. I put everything back exactly how I found it without saying a word, but inside, I was screaming. All the bills I'd been paying, all those times I'd shown up when they needed help. I'd skipped all my own trips because I was sending them money. Instead, and this is how they saw me, as nothing. I could have set myself on fire to keep them warm, and they'd complain about the smoke damage. I drove home in a daze, unsure what to do. Confront them. Demand an explanation. Beg for inclusion? Write a strongly worded letter? Hire a skywriter to spell what the fudge over their house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the last 3 years in my head, all the checks I'd written, all the automatic payments. I'd set up all the times I'd dipped into my own savings to help them. And for what? To be erased, to be nothing. I pulled out my bank statements and started adding up the payments. Over 3 years, I had given them over $40,000. $40,000. That's a down payment on a house. It's a master's degree. That's a really nice car, or a rather mediocre boat. And they didn't even bother leaving me a coffee mug in their will. I decided to wait, to watch, to see if they'd ever tell me, and if they believed I deserved to know. And that's when I made a decision that might get me in trouble. I didn't tell them what I knew. I didn't confront them. I just quit. I stopped answering. When they called about invoices, stopped sending money. They stopped relying on me for support. Stopped setting myself on fire to keep others warm who weren't even grateful for the heat. I promised myself I would give them 3 months. 3 months to either come clean or prove to me that I was worth more than my money. 3 months to see if they'd realize I was pulling away. To my astonishment, they didn't. Instead, the requests just became more demanding, entitled, and needy. The financial equivalent of a kid throwing a tantrum in the candy aisle. Jessica, your electricity bill is past due. When will you send the money? Jessica, we need the property taxes. Paid by Friday. Jessica, have you forgotten about the cable bill? Your dad is missing his shows? No one asked if I was okay, if anything had happened, or if I needed help with a change. They were so far up their own asses, they could see their tonsils. And Jacob. Radio silence. Apparently, the family financial manager wasn't concerned with day-to-day expenses. Surprising how financial expertise doesn't extend to actually paying for things. About a month into my financial strike, I went to their place for dinner. Mom had called and specifically asked me to come over. We need to talk about something, she said, which usually means we need you to write a check for something. I didn't want to go, but I went anyway, because apparently I'm a masochist. Maybe I was still hoping that they would notice something was wrong, that they'd ask if I was all right. They'd acknowledge me as a person with feelings, rather than just a handy ATM with legs. Dinner was typical, with conversations dominated by Jacob's latest accomplishments, even though he wasn't present. Dad mentioned Jacob's interest in investing in a new tech startup. Mom added that Jacob had sent them a gift basket from an expensive gourmet store I couldn't afford to shop at, and as I was helping clear the dishes, Mom chirped, "Oh, Jessica, the property tax bill arrived yesterday. It's $3,200 this year. Can you take care of it by Friday? Just like that?" No, please. No acknowledgement that she was asking me for over $3,000. No recognition that I had been ignoring their payment requests for weeks. Just the assumption that I would pay because that's what I did. That was my role, the accountable one, the wallet. I can't this month, I responded, keeping my tone neutral as I rinsed a plate. Mom froze, sponge in hand. What are you saying? You can't. I actually can't. I'm having some money problems of my own. This wasn't a lie. My financial dilemma was that I had been losing money to them for years. But this is crucial, Jessica. It's property tax. If we don't pay, we'll face penalties. I shrugged. I'm sure Jacob can help. He's doing so well with his financial expertise and everything. Mom's expression became convoluted, as if she were trying to solve a complex math problem. Jacob. But he doesn't. We don't ask Jacob for money. Why not? Because he's busy, has his own expenses in life. So I don't. Mom looked completely perplexed, as if I had suddenly started speaking Klingon. That's different. You're the responsible one. Does that mean I'm also responsible for your bills? We've also helped you, you know? Do you remember when you needed money for car repairs? In college, we sent it right away, no questions asked. I had to laugh at that. Mom, that was $800 like 15 years ago. I've given you tens of thousands of dollars since then. It's not the same thing. Mom's expression tightened. I didn't realize you were keeping score. And that was it. The moment I knew, nothing would change. They saw no issue with the arrangement. They didn't understand why I was backing off. In their minds, this was exactly how things should be. I pay, they take. Jacob gets everything. The circle of financial dysfunction. I dried my hands with a dish towel and grabbed my purse. I should go. What about property taxes? Mom called after me as I headed for the door. I only turned back long enough to reply, not my problem. I walked out. Then, 3 weeks ago, Mom called and invited me to join them for lunch. We need to talk about something important, she told me. My heart actually skipped a beat. Was this it? Would they tell me about the will? Apologize, maybe offer me a kidney. At that point, I would have accepted any organ of recognition. I arrived at the restaurant early, feeling anxious but also a little hopeful. They arrived 20 minutes late, with Jacob in tow. We ordered, then made small talk about the weather in Mom's garden. Then, when our lunch arrived, Mom cleared her throat and said, Jessica, dear, we wanted to talk to you about the bills. We've noticed you haven't been keeping up with things lately. I waited. Surely this was the prelude to the real conversation. We apologize for treating you like an unpaid utility service, Dad chimed in. We understand everyone goes through tough times. If you were having financial difficulties, you should have told us. We're family. I almost choked on my water. They were lecturing me about financial concerns, despite the fact that I had been supporting their lifestyle for years. The irony was thick enough to ice a cake, but I kept my composure. I'm doing well, actually. I'm just reassessing my budget. Translation. Moving funds from the bank of enabling you to the republic of taking care of myself for once, Mom seemed relieved. Okay, good. So you'll pay the electricity bill this week. It's been 2 months and they're threatening to disconnect service. Jacob, who had been silent until now, added, It's crucial to stay on top of these things. Financial responsibility is critical. I stared at him. Then I looked at my parents. Were they for real? Was this really happening? Did I have an aneurysm? Was I being pranked? Where were the hidden cameras? Jacob continued, warming up to his topic. I've been looking at Mom and Dad's whole financial situation, and I'm concerned. Their retirement planning needs careful thought. That's why I've been stepping in to help and manage things. Manage things? I repeated. Like paying their bills? He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. No, not the daily expenses. It's more about the big picture, like investing and estate planning. The future, I repeated. And that's... When Mom dropped the bomb as casually as if she were commenting on the weather, oh, and while we have you both here, we recently updated our will. Jacob will handle everything once the time comes. With his financial expertise, he's simply more suited to the task. We know you understand, Jessica. You've always been very practical. They'd planned it. I waited until a public place. They brought Jacob as backup. I never intended to apologize or explain. This lunch wasn't about coming clean. It was about ensuring I continued to pay their bills, even though they had cut me out of their future plans. It was a response to my sudden surge of financial self-respect. Sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, as the entire realization washed over me. I wasn't family. I was a utility, service, a means to an end. I wasn't a daughter. I was walking, talking direct deposit. I lowered my fork carefully, took a sip of water, and placed a $20 bill on the table for my dinner. "I think I should go," I murmured softly, "but you've barely touched." "Your food?" Mom insisted. I just looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. I'm not hungry anymore. Not for food. Not for the emotional scraps they were tossing my way. As I stood to leave, Dad called after me. "So, about that electric bill." I turned back just long enough to say, "I'm sure Jacob can handle it. He's better positioned for that kind of thing." Throwing their own remarks back at them felt amazing, like returning a decade's worth of Christmas fruitcakes all at once. I walked out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't send angry texts or make dramatic phone calls. I just walked home, sat down at my computer, and meticulously withdrew myself from their financial lives with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. I canceled every automatic payment I had set up. I closed all joint accounts, contacted every utility company, and removed my name as an authorized payer. I emailed their HOA to inform them I would no longer be paying the dues. I even called their lawn service to discontinue the monthly maintenance I had been covering. I double-checked everything, dotted every I, and severed every financial cord with the same care as someone closing their tabs after a night of drinking. Except I was finally sobering up. The sheer delight I felt with each cancellation, removal, and deletion was alarming. To be honest, it felt too good. Like I was finally regaining control of something that had slipped away from me. Each click, call, and confirmation email added another brick to the wall I was building between myself and their financial exploitation. Then I blocked their numbers. Not permanently, but just for a week. I needed time to think without the guilt trips and demands, like a financial detox. For a week I felt strange. It's lighter in some ways, yet heavier in others. I expected to feel guilty, but instead, I felt sad. It was sad that the family I thought I had didn't exist. I was sad that I had wasted so many years trying to earn affection. That should have been unconditional. You shouldn't have to pay for your seat at the family table. When I unblocked their numbers, the texts poured in. Confused at first, then concerned, then angry, but not worried about me. Concerned about bills, payments, and services. My favorite was Dad's. "The internet is down. How am I supposed to watch my YouTube videos?" "I don't know, Dad, maybe rub two sticks together and see if Netflix comes on." I didn't respond to any of them. What was there to say? "Sorry, your human ATM grew a spine." 2 weeks went by, then 3. I focused on myself for once, started looking at my personal finances, and was shocked to find how much I'd been giving away all these years. Thousands, probably tens of thousands. Enough money, in some areas, to buy a tiny house? If boomers are right about millennial spending habits, that equates to about 8,000 avocado toasts. I started therapy, started spending money on myself without remorse. I joined a gym. I scheduled a hair appointment at a salon that didn't also clip pet fur. I bought new sheets with a thread count that didn't feel like I was sleeping on sandpaper. After years of sacrificing pennies to make my parents' lives comfortable, these small luxuries felt monumental.
Ow.
The calls and texts kept coming, becoming more urgent. Mom went from angry to guilt-tripping. "I can't believe you're doing this to us after all we've done for you." Dad was more direct. "You need to start paying these bills again. This is unacceptable behavior." Then yesterday I received the text I had been waiting for from my mother. "The electricity is out. Did you forget to pay? I miss you. Can we speak?" There was no acknowledgement of what happened at lunch, just the presumption that I would keep paying, keep fixing, keep being the ATM. She might as well have just texted "money, please," like Mona Lisa from Parks and Recreation. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "No, I remembered exactly what you said."
What?
Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. I slept like a baby, actually. The kind of sleep you get after putting down a backpack full of rocks. You've been hauling uphill for years. I woke up this morning to 37 missed calls and a voicemail from my father. ranting about responsibility and family obligation. But here's the part where I might be the villain. I knew they didn't have enough money to pay the electricity bill. I knew their power would be cut off if I didn't intervene. I did nothing. In fact, I drove to their neighborhood around the time I knew the power company would be there to disconnect service, parked across the street, and watched. I watched as the utility van pulled up. I watched as the worker got out, walked to the meter, and did whatever they needed to do to turn off the power. I watched the lights in my parents' house go out. I sat there, sipping my coffee, and felt nothing. No guilt. No sadness. Just a serene certainty that this was the logical consequence of their choices. They had used me. They took me for granted. And now they were learning what life was like without their personal ATM. My parents stepped outside, both on their phones. I could see them gesturing, probably leaving me more panicked voicemails. Dad paced the driveway. Mom sat on the porch steps, head in her hands. I should have felt something, right? Guilt, remorse, the overwhelming urge to go in and fix everything. But I only felt relief. I was relieved that I was no longer responsible. I was relieved that I wouldn't have to keep setting myself on fire to keep them warm. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm the terrible person for leaving them in the dark instead of just paying the bill one more time. Perhaps I should have confronted them directly instead of giving them this silent treatment. After years of being responsible, reliable, and a fixer, I am exhausted. I'm just really, truly exhausted. There's only so many times you can be the family doormat before you realize you're being stepped on. Yes, after 2 weeks, their power was eventually restored. Jacob finally stepped up and paid the amount after 3 days. 3 days passed before Mr. Financial Acumen decided to handle a simple utility payment. I guess his PowerPoint skills don't apply to paying utility bills. Who knew? Those 3 days were interesting. I received hourly calls and texts, each more urgent than the last. Dad threatened to call the police and report me for elder abuse. Mom alternated between guilt trips. I can't believe you'd let your own parents suffer. And manipulation, will have to sell our jewelry to pay expenses. Hey, Jacob alternated. Between angry emails accusing me of being heartless and desperate messages, begging me to just pay the bill one more time and we'll figure it out. I didn't respond to any of them. I kept reminding myself of the will of being written out of existence, but still expected to support their lifestyle. Years of being taken for granted. It was like a mantra, keeping me going when my resolve began to waver. On day 3, the calls stopped. The texts stopped. They all went radio silent. I was curious enough to drive past their house that evening. The lights were back on. Jacob's car was in the driveway. I later learned that he had finally stepped up and paid the electricity bill. Then he spent the evening explaining to my parents that perhaps they shouldn't have relied on me for money all these years, while planning to leave everything to him. Apparently there was a lot of yelling, crying, denial, and justification. Jessica never seemed to mind. Second, I received a handwritten letter from my mother yesterday. Not an email or a text, but an actual letter, which shows how serious this is, because my mother hates writing anything by hand. I think she complained about hand cramps the last time she wrote something by hand, which was probably my birth certificate. The letter was more of a confused attempt to explain what happened than an apology. She claimed they'd always seen me as the strong one and had no intention of taking advantage. She said they didn't tell me about the will because they didn't want to upset me and assumed I wouldn't be concerned with material things, as if being written out of existence is somehow a tribute to my spiritual character. Thanks, Mom. I'll pay my rent with enlightenment. The real kicker was the last paragraph. We always relied on you because you were the only person we could trust. Jacob might look good on paper, but you were our rock. So I was trustworthy enough to pay their expenses, but not with their legacy. Nice. I'm dependable enough to fund their retirement, but not enough to inherit the spoils of it. I think it makes sense. I haven't responded yet. I'm still deciding what to say or if I should say anything at all. Currently torn between writing K on a blank sheet of paper and sending them a bill for all the money I've spent over the years with interest. Oh, and Jacob called me too. Get this. He claimed he had no idea how much I had been paying. Thought I was just helping with odd bills, not practically subsidizing their entire existence. When I told him how much I'd been giving them monthly, $1,350. On average, he stopped talking for the first time in his life. "You've been paying that much each month?" he finally asked. "For 3 years," I replied. "While you were busy creating PowerPoint presentations about their estate that I wouldn't be part of." He had the decency to sound embarrassed. I knew. "You help them out occasionally, but not like this." He told me it was just minor details. "Well, now you know," I replied. "And now, it's your turn." He remained silent. "So, where do things stand now?" "I'm still not sending money. I'm still processing my feelings about everything. I'm still figuring out what kind of relationship I want to have with my family in the future, if any. Right now, I'm leaning towards a Christmas card from a different state level of communication. But I know one thing for sure. I never regret standing up for myself. Not for 1 second. It turns out my spine works perfectly once I decide to. Use it. Thank you for the validation. Strangers on the internet sometimes help you realize you're not insane for wanting basic decency and respect from your own family. The bar was so low, it was practically a trip hazard in hell. And they still found a way to limbo beneath it. P.S. For those curious about therapy, yes, I have started talking to someone. The first session was yesterday. My therapist's eye twitched. Only 3 times during my story, which I consider a success. P.S. to the person who suggested I spend the money I'm saving to go on a fantasy vacation instead. I've already bought tickets to Thailand for next month. This is the first big thing I've ever done for myself. It's going to get one of those shirts that say, "My parents wrote me out of their will, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, emotional trauma, and a trip to Thailand."